patients were the instigators of it, that actually it would have survived that change in policy?
Possibly not, no. And yeah, possibly not, because at the time I had met with patient groups, and even though they loved it, they were kind of like the end sort of recipient of a letter, you know, rather than having the sort of like strategic overarching influence over the project. I guess if we'd set it up again, we'd probably want to have patients and Nicola's influence over what we did. But at the time, you know, it was a learning curve.
Okay, so let's introduce the panel now. Let's start with you. Tell us who you are and why you're here.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Depak, Kalra, and I head up an IMI not-for-profit spin-out.
Are you hearing it? This is...
Do I need to...
It's switched off. You need to switch it on.
Okay, I'll start again. My name is Dipak Kalra, and I head up a European not-for-profit IMI spin-out called the European Institute for Innovation Through Health Data. Our remit is to bring stakeholders together to help them to collectively make better use of health data for the benefit of all.
Okay, Nicola, who will be well known to this audience, I suspect.
Thank you, Vivian. Nicola Bedlington from the European Patients Forum, which is an umbrella organisation convening European disease-specific organisations from across the disease areas and national patient coalitions from very many of the EU member states to be the united collective voice. I also have the pleasure to be the co-lead of a very important IMI project called Paradigm, which is essentially looking at meaningful patient engagement in the entire life cycle of medicines, looking at research prioritization right through to real-world evidence, co-leading that together with FPIA, really looking at a framework and the right sort of resources and tools to enhance patient engagement, and really making sure that all of the stakeholders, the regulators, HTA people, the medical professionals, industry and patient organisations are moving forward together. In another capacity with EPF, and we've brought this up a lot this morning, the whole area of having a learning health system. We see a lot of things happening in the context of patient engagement, also in the IMI environment. But what we also need to do, and this is the nexus that's really critical, is to make sure there's meaningful patient involvement in health systems design, health systems strengthening, health services. That has to happen as well, to have that enabling environment for products and technologies to fall in the right place. And then finally, I think EPF and a number of our member organisations have tried very hard to support IMI over the years in developing a progressive patient engagement strategy. So patients are actually involved in the strategic focus of IMI, looking at some of the prioritisation around core topics and meaningful involvement in relevant IMI projects. So I know there's been a lot of discussion around patient engagement during the course of the morning, and I just wanted to share with everybody that we're maybe not absolutely there yet, but there's a lot of effort, a lot of goodwill, a lot of commitment to make sure that it happens in the right way.
And just quickly respond to, I think it was Sam's suggestion over there about incentives, that you mandate meaningful involvement.
I think this has been discussed, the idea of making patient involvement mandatory. I think that has to be looked very carefully, because there's a risk there of simply a box-ticking exercise.
Yeah.
So I think
that's why I said meaningful involvement.
We have to look a little bit more profoundly at the kind of indicators that would actually look at meaningful patient involvement engagement, and make sure that we're not just looking at process, but we're also looking at outcomes.
Yeah.
We're not just looking at immediate outcomes, but longer-term outcomes. And that's where I think IMI is in a strong position to actually look longitudinally. We're 10 years old. Let's look at the future and where we'd be in 10 years' time. And can some of these fantastic projects actually look at the longitudinal impact also on the policy front as well?
Kim.
Kim Hawkins. I'm with Sanofi. I am the head of clinical operations for our Sanofi Genzyme business unit, which includes our rare disease, our neurology, our immunology, and our oncology therapeutic areas. But I like to say that's kind of my day job. And I'm here today to talk about a really disruptive approach to conducting clinical trials through the use of sort of a virtual trial or a decentralized trial. And happy to say that I am, Sanofi is the co-lead for an IMI topic now on decentralized trials in the EU that's going through the proposal stages now.
Okay, so tell us a bit more about that, because actually this is where, new technologies are enabling trials in a way that we've not seen before, and actually at a time when, particularly with precision medicine, we are really going to have to alter the way that we have done clinical trials in the past.
Sure, happy to. It's, if you think about, when we look at some of the research that's out there, there's a very high percentage of people who say they will participate in clinical trials. It's somewhere around 90%. But when you actually look at the number of people who do participate in clinical trials, it's under 10%. And they really cite a couple of key levers there. One is there's a trust factor. One is really understanding what is out there to be able to engage with, but the biggest factor cited by patients, by individuals, is geography. So the idea that we can, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. I think this is a very disruptive approach to the way we conduct clinical trials. In the ways that we can think about how to provide access to those trials, take the geography out of the question and allow patients to participate in their homes or more locally through their own local care networks is going to have benefits to patients and benefits to the industry in general.
Okay, how do you see, Dipak, convergence in your particular area in data?
Right, well, there's probably two different dimensions of convergence, and I'll be quite brief. The first one is around sources of data. So historically, clinical trials have had their own data capture, their own data silos, although I'm delighted to say that many companies are making their control arm data now available for observational data. But there's routinely captured information in healthcare, which is much richer, much more reflective of the diversity of real patients, real scenarios of care, greater age ranges, etc. So we're very pleased to see so many big data projects, including important IMI projects, helping to pioneer how we can learn from that, although we need to bring those worlds together. And of course, we know that over the next few years, the volume of patient-generated data is going to outrank the volume of professionally generated data. And unless we have patients inside the loop of knowing about the data they're capturing and how they can offer it into a broader learning ecosystem, we're going to fail. But that's the data dimension of convergence. The other really important convergence, the more important one, is the learning health system paradigm. And by that I mean that we collaborate across stakeholders to say we can all get value from the data. And let's start not from the healthcare professional, but the patient. Patients need to be learning from their data and from pooled data so they can make better tuned, better supported decisions about their wellness, prevention, disease management, and so on. Then healthcare professionals need to have better care pathways that are evidence optimized based on learning from big data. And then I'll quickly jump right the way through, because you know the research story, but right the way through to product development, and hopefully in the future, even the pharma industry embracing what your previous panel was expressing, that they shift from being the purveyors of pills to being active members of the healthcare partnership, healthcare delivery partnership. That means pharma has to learn more from data than ever before in order to learn how to do that. So there's a human stakeholder cooperation and convergence that I think is much more important than the data convergence.
And you talk about patient-generated data, and you're thinking about wearables and all those kind of things. But actually, the bit of the patient data that we've completely neglected is actually patients entering their own data. their, diary entries or entries about things that are, I mean, I know we found it in the 100,000 Genomes Project where people have entered data that they thought was thought to be trivial data, but actually it turns out to be incredibly important data because actually it reveals a particular phenotype in a way or distinguishes a phenotype. So how do we incorporate that? How do we get patients to, see themselves as partners in data collection?
Well, no, I'd like to challenge you on that if you don't mind.
Of course.
In a friendly way. You said partners in data collection. And I'm afraid I'm a little bit irritated by that concept. The concept of patient-reported outcomes as a phrase says the patient is reporting. The patient is the data enterer. They're the lackey who keys in the data. What I would like is the concept of patient-directed outcomes. That is, what outcomes matter to those people. And so I think the answer to your question is that we shift the paradigm of data capture from asking patients to capture data for somebody else to getting patients to capture data that matters to them. Why does it matter to them? Because there are cycles of feedback that tell them what to do with it. In other words, the data has to give meaning to decisions and patterns of behavior that patients themselves will do. And once they become stakeholders, not in the data, but in the knowledge and the decisions, they will then value the data and be willing to have data, to capture more data, and then, of course, they'll be happy to share it with other co-decision makers, co-knowledge generators.
Suitably admonished.
With apology.
Not at all. And you're absolutely right, because, for instance, we know that, for instance, sleep patterns are very important to some patients, and they want to report them, but there's no one to report them to because their consultant isn't interested in their sleep because they're more interested in their kidney, for instance. So those things are very important. Bruce, you were nodding madly there.
There's a company I know who specialises in just that, needs-based patient-reported outcome measures, and we were talking about this last night over dinner. So their thing is, rather than having the symptom-based problems that are usually developed by clinicians and validated in a medical setting, these are needs-based, and they pick up other findings that might not be picked up by a traditional symptoms-based prom. So this is things like, rather than, can you pivot your body from left to right? Can you wash yourself properly in the shower? So you're able to sort of look at how that sort of relates to the patient in their own real-world setting.
I think there's quite a big body of work now moving forward on actually not talking about patient-reported outcomes, but actually, as you say, patient design, patient-relevant outcome measures. And I think it's interesting to look at some of the stuff that OECD is actually driving forward, their Paris initiative, and they're actually very open to involve patients and looking at working with patient groups through EPF but others at the indicators that really matter to patients on issues like comorbidities. So things are moving here also on the policy front.
Okay, anybody like to say what they think the challenges are here?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
Dipak,
yes.
Well, you said yes before I got
yes. Just stop fighting, boys.
Okay,
just get on with it.
Okay.
Right.
I'm probably going to say the same thing anyway.
I think the challenges are probably the same, actually, as have been highlighted in other panels. We have healthcare systems that operate still mostly on rewarding activity and effort made, not on what impact they've had on people. The health systems and their ICT, no offense to the ICT sector here, still favor procurement and use of systems that support operational efficiency of the organization, not the connectivity of the actors looking after a patient. So we have the wrong business drivers for ICT procurement, we have the wrong reward inside healthcare, and then I think we also have a set of innovation creators, the pharma industry, the medical device industry, who are creating things that they believe are fulfilling a market need, understandably. But the market need itself needs to evolve first. So we need to change what we want to buy so that the companies start to create what we will need tomorrow, not more of what we need today.
And how does IMI incentivize
Well,
or
that's
change
brilliant.
that?
I'm glad you asked me that.
We rehearsed this weeks in advance.
Okay, so at the moment, now I'm going to be a little bit pejorative and I'm going to make some assumptions because I'm not on the inside of how IMI call topics are designed. But what I believe is that the industry flags up candidate areas where it believes there is real value in public-private collaboration to solve a problem. And then they fashion call texts and then they go out to consultation. The trouble is, a little bit like I've seen with the ICT sector, we get solutions first and then the problem is discovered later. What I would love to see is more co-design of call topics with pain point holders who say, what are we struggling with in healthcare? What are patients struggling with? What are the problems? Now, I'm not saying the whole of IMI needs to change, but I think a slipstream within BD for BO should be focusing on the care delivery pain points rather than the industry pain points. And then inviting the industry to react and say, given these pain points, where do you as a pharma industry feel you could co-create a call topic in which you can play a contributing role to solve the problem?
And how would that go down with you, say, at Sanofi?
I mean, it's an interesting proposition, and brave. I can see.
Now, brave is a word that usually means no, but I mean, it's.
Well, in complete honesty, I mean, I can see the value there in co-development of a topic, especially right in the long term, as we were discussing, and not in the short term. But we have to definitely keep an eye on what our incentives are. And that may not be exactly matching.
Today, you won't have the incentives. I was only referring to a slipstream, not a dominating thread in IMI, but I think we need to give visibility to that. And I think this is where you would come in with a higher degree of risk because you would know the market exploitability isn't clear. But you'd help us make it clear. You'd make it happen.
Right. And in the long term, probably would have greater benefits for greater people across longer time.
But also, if it's something that payers have identified themselves as you call it their pain points, then actually isn't there a more readily available market in those areas which people have identified as being the things that are really important to them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thomas, thoughts on that? Bruce, sorry. This comes of having many panels.
Yeah, can I go back to the challenge? Yeah, can I go back to the challenge question, actually? I prefer that one. So just to add to what Dipak was talking about, I think one of the big challenges that healthcare systems are still in silos, and they're in silos in lots of different ways. It's the technical silo and, kind of not being able to mobilize data properly. Even when data can be accessed, it's put into another silo. So I see on the screen there, we've got CPRD and we've got GPARD and we've got all these other silos. Actually, if you were to fix the underlying infrastructure and plumbing, build systems that were made to open standards and interoperable so that data could be mobilized more effectively within the ecosystem, you wouldn't need to have these other silos going. So I think one of the big challenges is to just solve that underlying technological plumbing problem, and then all the other innovation can start to be driven on top of that.
But isn't there also an issue? The reason why everybody wants their own little data set is because the way that the scientific system is set up at the moment is the measure of scientific success is a paper in a journal.
Yep.
And you need that little set of data to yourself, and you guard it to yourself because it's your entry to the high-level journals and the impact factors which you need to advance you in your academic career. Or am I just being a cynical old journalist?
Yeah, but the same data that's used in a healthcare system for direct patient care can be used for audit, quality benchmarking, to support academic research, commercial clinical trials, the whole thing. So, I just think it's more like health data is like the new running water. We just need to make it more potable.
Or drinkable.
Yes.
Yes, even.
Yes.
Okay, we've had your ideas, you two, about the identification of future call topics. Let's turn to you, Kim. How would you like future call topics to be identified?
So I think I very much like the idea of the sort of more collaborative, open nature of things. Definitely looking at, for sure, payers and what and the direction we're going there for integration of really what the market is pushing for. You know, I think I would go back to, you know, our current IMI topic of really making the accessibility a little bit stronger and better for patients as well.
Okay, Nicola, how would you how would you deal with that?
I totally agree with Dipak in terms of this idea of co-creation of call topics based on what the profound needs are out there. I think we should also be looking at synergies with the policy environment as well. I think, again, in this Brussels bubble, as we move forward with the next EU programming period, IMI and Horizon Europe, the bigger research program, needs to link in with policy evolution, and there should be this virtual cycle of research into policy back into research, and that's not happening in the way that it could be, and that requires a commitment of the Commission and also Member States for this intersectoral collaboration. I think patients need to be at the centre, but unless we have that, then there's a risk that we're not really squeezing the orange, and the outcomes of IMI projects aren't really being properly utilised and optimised. I think also we need to build into this notion, I mean, it's discussed a lot, but this whole area of sustainability and when a call topic is being devised, where that's going to be in the longer term, and we've talked a lot this morning about scale-up. I think within every single call topic there should be a key dimension on scale-up in the longer term as well, explicitly.
Okay, now that question is number 2 there. How can we make sure that the promising results from IMA-funded projects reach health systems and are made available and affordable in the EU? To me, goes absolutely to the heart of this whole event. So let's start with Dipak.
Okay.
Solve that problem immediately.
Well, actually, I have worked with a number of pharma companies on this issue. We've written some proposal ideas, which we have shared with IMI. They're in IMI's thinking space. Pierre knows this from the past. The problem is that we publish call topics and look for proposals based on excellence. I mean, that doesn't sound like an error, but of course, if you judge proposals on excellence, you're likely to get scientific excellence. You're likely to, in the public consortium. As a consequence, we are likely to fund consortia that don't intrinsically have those sustainability and scalability skills. And it may be wasteful for every single project to have to reinvent the learning on those. What I would prefer to see is IMI having some cross-cutting activities that are supportive of all projects, and this would be one of them. I would really love to see us having in IMI a scalability, sustainability service. And I do not mean it comes in year 4 to year 5 and says, oh, you've invented the wrong thing that's not likely to work. It's got to be there early in the project lifetime so that it can help to coerce towards successful, exploitable results.
So they should be swarming all over them right from the very start.
Right from the start.
Okay, Nicola, how would you
I
do
think
this?
Early dialogue is obviously something that's happening in certain environments, horizon scanning, etc. And there's probably not enough conversations happening with key opinion leaders that are actually driving health systems and the body politic within IMI, but then other research projects as well. So that will be an important dimension. The piece that hasn't really come to the fore today, and I think it's an important area to look at, is citizens and public involvement and creating more awareness amongst the broader community, the wider community, of the value of IMI and how it can actually render change in a meaningful way on the ground, leading to better outcomes for patients at the end of the day. And that perhaps jump, that bridge, hasn't quite happened. It's very, very difficult. We tried with the European Patient Academy on Therapeutic Innovation to also target citizens as well as patients, but we ended up having a rethink during the middle of the project because it was too challenging. So it's a big nut to crack, but I think it's definitely worth looking at to address this particular problem.
And I think actually it comes back to a more general point, is that the Commission in general is not particularly good at telling the citizens of Europe that it's done some really good stuff. Certainly didn't manage it with Britain. Don't even start me on Brexit. Don't even start me on Brexit. But that is a really important point, is that we don't go out there enough and say, actually, IMI is doing all this fantastic stuff. And I suspect that it might be thought of as being a club for industry, which is not really how it should be thought of at all. And it's not fair. But, okay, so what would you do?
Feeling a little bit picked on.
Oh, no, don't feel picked on.
No,
don't feel picked on, because actually I think that one of the things that we need to do is we need to show people that industry are not the evil twin.
Exactly, yeah. So I would say, just from my experience to date, and how we're moving our project forward, is really having a very strong stakeholder engagement aspect. And really what we mean by that are healthcare providers, end-to-end healthcare providers, patients, regulators, and on, to make sure that the focus is known, the activities are known. Obviously, this can't be done by itself, but I think we've talked a little bit over the course of the day about how important that stakeholder engagement really is. And starting from a very early time period, like you said, not thinking about this in month 50 when the project's almost over.
Okay, Bruce.
Yeah, I don't think it's about reaching the healthcare systems. I think it's about, once you've reached them, making it stick and making it sustainable. And it goes back to what I was talking about before at the beginning, about trying to sort of widen the scope and provide value for more stakeholders, because some of these projects, the decentralized clinical trials and so on, they're just as useful for supporting remote monitoring and care of patients in network care type models as they are for decentralized clinical trials. So, broaden the scope of it, and I think you would start to see more wider adoption in healthcare systems.
Okay, so let's have some questions from you in the audience. How would you like to see IMI proceed in this area? Thoughts from you? Yes.
Wanted to say one word about the last question on the IMI results, actually getting to where there should be and they're needed. I think that, and I thank you for all your excellent comments. I just add one thing. I do not think that as a community we have been very good at articulating the value of the potential of some of the results that our projects come up with. We're very good at pushing technology and saying how wonderful these innovations are, and they should be taken up by whoever, but we haven't been good at articulating that value that makes sense to those who are paying for it. So I echo lots of the comments in saying that we absolutely need to bring in much more proactively the payers, who are the people whose purse strings are tied and are constrained. And also, I think that our projects need to develop economic models that are new and innovative. And I think we need more of the scholarly type of health economists, as well as the HTA professionals and so on. But the scholarly piece of health economics, I think, is really important, because that's where the creating of novel, innovative models will come.
And that's where you also need integration, because health economists, by the way, if you want to put your children into a career, don't put them on the stage, suggest they be health economists, because there's such a huge demand for health economists, and there are very, very few of them. They're as rare as hen's teeth. We had a question over here. Joanna.
Is the microphone on? It is. I've enjoyed, listening to the thoughts from the panelists and the speakers, and we've talked a lot about collaboration and the value, and from patients and regulators and payers. But what I'm sitting here wondering is, are we at risk of creating too much bureaucracy towards innovation? And if we need everybody on board before we get anywhere, will it just take and we also talked about trying to accelerate the time to market. So maybe we make mistakes, maybe we don't get everybody involved. I guess we're talking about issues with current development. But then the more we talk about, and we need to do this, and we need to do this, and we need to do this, could that slow down innovation?
Okay, let me ask you all that question.
So before you put this all on
no, it's a perfectly valid challenge. How many people think here that actually if you get lots of people on board, it will slow down the very thing that IMI is set up to do? Hands up if you do. So it's a few, but it's not overwhelming.
Okay, fab.
Right.
I'm on my own.
Okay.
Knock yourself out.
Tell us who you are.
Thank you very much. I have a question. So, because with the technology now,
so tell us who you are.
Sorry. I'm from.
They can't read it. It's no good showing the rest of the audience your badge. This is Maria Burgos Gonzalez, ladies and gentlemen.
My name is Marta Burgos. I'm from Asociación Parkinson Madrid. This is a Patients Association. So. And regarding technology, so it's true that we have a lot of chance and a lot of things that we can do, but as the speaker said, we need the data from the patients, but they are not data providers. So we cannot stay all the day with the data, tell them, put your data here, 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 as attacks, because they have more things to do in their own lives, even to have a disease. The thing that I'm asking, and it's a challenge that I'm asking a lot because I work with people with Parkinson's disease that in some point they are losing the mobility or they are losing the skill to put data in some device, is that now we have to work in the adherence to the pharmacological treatment, adherence for non-pharmacological treatment, it means therapies, and adherence to the device. And I think that the gamification here, there is a good choice, but the feedback that is proposed here, it doesn't mean something that is with the expectation of the patients. That means that you can provide your data, but in some kind of disease, has neurodegenerative disease, your feedback will be with the neurologist in 1 year, and sorry, but it's nothing that it can do with your health because this is a neurodegenerative disease. We can improve the quality of life, but there is nothing to do more than science and to have more data for the future, that it will be a good point. So my question here is how we use the technology and how we could work from a creative way from this adherence to the device, don't to feel of tax of patients that they have enough with their own disease and how to manage their own disease, but at the same time we need data from them in order to study. How we can work in this way?
Okay, so Dipak, I'm going to come to you on that question because I think that this is about, if I've understood your question.
Okay. Could I ask you though, just to paraphrase in a crisp way, because I actually found the audio a little difficult.
Okay, so my understanding is that actually collecting for patients that are agreeing to all the use of their data and all that time is a full-time job in itself, and these are people who've got really difficult conditions. But actually capturing the data from those people is really important. So how do we make sure that we capture the right data from people and get the right permissions whilst not bothering them over much with... So it's that terrible, difficult thing of we've got ourselves into a situation of where we have huge, well, certainly in the UK, where we have hugely long consent forms. And we need to have those consent forms, but we also need for patients, you know, to do things in a simple way that doesn't interfere with their disease management.
So I think you've really got two different twists there. One is around the capture, and one is about the permissions to use, if I could separate those two. The capture, I think, yes, painfully filling in paper diaries, painfully filling in, typing into web forms is time-consuming and annoying. And I'm really delighted with the innovations in the ICT sector that mean that this will increasingly be a seamless exercise for individuals to just clip things on, wear things, have things captured for them. Maybe proofread and just check it looks all right before they hit send, or maybe they're happy it's transmitted in real time. And I think we're going to see that evolution. So I'm excited by that. I don't fear that burden as I used to. Permissions-wise, I am fearful, because I think, especially in the year of GDPR introduction, we have heightened societal anxiety, maybe appropriately, maybe disproportionately, about privacy protection, without balancing it with the messages about benefit. I mean, when I look at what we've seen in the IMI projects I've been involved in, I've been really thrilled by the pre-competitive nature of the pharma companies involved, and I was interested that maybe there are some issues with getting hold of intellectual property after a project, but what I've seen is those companies remain pre-competitive at the end and are very happy for the results I've certainly touched to be made more widely available. So I've seen a real, so forget the letter of the law, I've seen a spirit in the people that is fantastic. But what we need to do is to make sure that the public are aware of how the use of their data makes a difference. Nicola and I are both involved with FPIA on a new initiative to try to help do that. It's really important because otherwise the messages to society are all about privacy protection and danger and internet leakages and CDs left on trains and in the post. That's all they hear. We need the public to hear about fantastic results that companies like yours have done with the data, either breakthrough discoveries in terms of drugs or diagnostics, or just even personalized medicine initiatives, ways we've really used the data to deliver value. And I think that will help the permissions dialogue with the public.
Terrific, thank you. I'm going to take one more question, which was here. Tell me who you are.
I am part of the Scientific Committee of IMI, and I'd like to come back to your question to the audience and the comment from John Willis, because I think we have to distinguish, we have to be a bit careful there. Pioneers in innovation will always go on their own, and I think we shouldn't stop them there. And I think what IMI can actually do is to try to leverage that the time until everybody else catches up is shorter. And I think maybe that's the real thing we have to work on.
That's another really important thing. I mean, Microsoft was once two men in a shed in Seattle. Okay. I'm going to finish it there, and I know there were people I haven't got round to, but I must release you for lunch, or else you're all going to fall in a heap on the floor. Could you please thank the panel, first of all?